Throughout human history, one thing has been a constant: crime. There are many types of crimes committed and many types of investigators who look into them. Criminals get very creative to stay ahead of the law. Find out crime doesn't pay. Join Jsson Truth as he dissects various crimes, mysteries, and disappearances.
Crime Maze.
Well, hello, my beautiful, amazing YouTube family. My name is Jason, and today I want to do my first video on YouTube talking about this all-important, fascinating, and complex case, and it's a tragic one, of the IDAHO4. That's right. Now, many of you may already be familiar with this case, and if you are, some of the information is going to be familiar to you. Those of you that are new to this case, welcome, and hopefully you'll learn a lot today. But even for those of you that know this case inside and out so far, I'm going to give you my theories on how they got to Bryan Kohberger. And I'm going to mention a few YouTube channels. We're going to have some fun. I'm going to mention one channel in particular that I'm really enjoying. Maybe we'll expose a few people as well briefly, but here we go. So the IDAHO4, of course, we know took place on November 13th, 2022 in an off-campus. This is in Idaho, in the United States there, of course, the University of Idaho. It was an off-residence campus. And this, unfortunately, there was an absolutely horrendous atrocity of 4 beautiful university students that were stabbed to death in ungodly hours, somewhere between most likely 3 and 4 a.m. We're still trying to figure out sometimes the timeline exactly. But and who did it? Well, we'll get into who got arrested in a moment. But before I do, I want to give my sincere gratitude for all of you that have tried to demand justice on this case. We want the right person convicted. And of course, my heart goes out to the families, as many of us, I'm sure, feel the same. Let our heart and souls go out to the beautiful, of course, souls that were lost, the 4 beautiful university students. And let our hearts go out and our sympathies and you know, to the family members, of course, the parents involved, of these kids. So without further ado, again, the atrocities happened on November 13th. And the 4 university students, you had Madison Mogen, who was 21 years old, I believe. You had her best friend. These girls knew each other and were best friends. They were like sisters, apparently, for, most of their lives, since they were before they were teenagers, right? They were little girls. They grew up together. So Madison Mogen's best friend was, of course, Kaylee Gonzalez. She was 21 as well. She got stabbed to death, unfortunately, and died as well, unalived. And then, of course, you had Zainer Kernudel. Zainer Kernudel was another amazing person and university student and beautiful. Zaina was 20 years old, and her boyfriend was none other than Ethan Chapman. He was a strapping, about 6'3", 6'4" foot guy, and athletic, apparently, and he was, I believe, 20 years old as well. Yes. And then, to top it off, and this is why this case is so bizarre and really complicated, you had 2 surviving roommates in this house. That's right. We had Dylan Mortison, right? She was downstairs. And her roommate was Bethany Funk. And for some reason, both of these girls were untouched. We know we found out in the hearings and the trials coming up, of course. This is why I'm excited to do this video in part, to finally start doing videos on the IDAHO4 on YouTube, because the trial's about to start. Dylan Mortison was texting apparently Bethany Funk during the unalivings. I got to use that stupid word unalivings because of YouTube's, censors or whatever, algorithm. But so they were texting back and forth. What the hell were the text messages? We're going to find out in trial the context of those text messages. And then the other absolutely bizarre thing as well, those of you that are familiar with this case, you all know, guys and gals, that Dylan and Bethany, nobody called 911. The two girls, they waited over 8 hours, and neither of them called 911 in the end. They had a friend. Friends called 911. We still haven't heard the 911 call. Rest assured, again, the prosecution and the defense, the prosecution's going to have to play that 911 call, and it'll be very interesting to see what the defense says on that, you know, and what you audiences are going to say when we hear that 911 call. So it's just bizarre. And I'm going to read you off in a few minutes. I'm going to read you off an interesting, one of many interesting comments that came on Reddit, and they were asking some questions about the roommates. Okay? Now, let's go to some of the YouTube creators, and I want to thank all of you that are sincerely truthful YouTube content creators. Those of you that are honest, that are digging for the truth, thank you very much for, again, trying to demand absolute justice in this all-important case, getting justice for the families, and particularly the loved ones that have gone to heaven, right? The students, the young, beautiful university students. Again, Madison Mogan, Kaylee Gonzalez, Zainer Canoodle, and Ethan Chapman. Now, one of the YouTube channels the one that I absolutely love, again, I go by Jason True Crime Lover, but sincerely, I want to give a shout out to Jay Embree, also known as Pavarotti. That's right. He always has glasses on. I should have brought my dark shades. He wears dark shades all the time, so you can't see his eyes. It's bizarre, but that's Jay's Embree's shtick, everyone, and it works for him. And he's grown his channel significantly, and he deserves all the praise and all the accolades, in my opinion, that he gets, because this man has been digging in. He's done amazing research. He's truthful. He's shown a lot of integrity, and when he makes a mistake, or if he gets, a little bit carried away in exposing somebody harshly, or if he's wrong, especially, he'll apologize. Okay? And that's what we need. So, but I love how he exposes some of these dirty players on social media and the mainstream media. All of us that are interested in getting justice on this case, I believe we should be going after, of course, mainstream media at times. People like Nancy Grace, right? Then you got a YouTube channel. It's a huge channel named Interview Room with Chris McDonald, I believe is his name. He's a former cop, law enforcement. But this guy, check out his channel if you want, but this guy's a total guilter. And he's making ridiculous, outrageous statements at times, in my opinion. Okay? Trying to make it sound like the blood on the railing, for example, and the blood in a glove could be, he says, a nothing burger. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And what I'm referring to is we just found out in the hearings that it was confirmed that there's at least 3 unknown DNA of some male in the house during the atrocities that was found out, everybody. Yeah, they collected DNA, but they never went into the database, apparently. The law enforcement chose not to search for these individuals, at least publicly, that we're aware of. It's outrageous. You had actual blood on a railing. And again, in or on a glove. And this isn't touch DNA. Now let's get into the touch DNA on the knife sheath. And by the way, of course, those of you that are new to the channel and new to this information, people that are familiar with the case, I'll just go over it. Who did they arrest? Well, law enforcement, we know, arrested Bryan Kohberger on December 13th? December 30th, pardon me. They arrested him in the outskirts of Idaho there. It was a residence in Pennsylvania. The suspect, again, is Bryan Kohberger, arrested him in Madison County, I believe it was. Anyway, so he was arrested. And this guy is a PhD. This is what, again, makes this case so interesting and really bizarre, because Bryan Kohberger, of all subjects that he took, we know that he was working on a PhD in criminology. He was actually a PhD student, my friends. Unbelievable. But the guilters will try to, in mainstream media, they'll try to make it sound like they just follow the law enforcement's narrative. And mainstream media will say, oh, it must be another Ted Bundy. He's another Ted Bundy. Bullshit. First of all, Ted Bundy was a serial killer. Ted Bundy, when he did do the atrocities of, unfortunately, trying to kill several women all at once in the dorm room, well, by then, Ted Bundy was off his rockers. He had escaped from jail. He was insane at that point. But Bryan Kohberger, we know, has no connection to these students at all. He never stalked these girls. So he's got a lot going in his favor, showing that he's most likely innocent of these crimes. I truly believe he's innocent. Jay Embree, to his credit, Jay Embree is convinced that Bryan Kohberger is innocent. And Jay Embree shows you the proof, everybody. Jay Embree has figured out, by and large, this case, the truth. That's right. He shows you, for example, that it's got to do with drugs. A lot of us suspected that there were drugs involved in this crime, like an informant to do with drug-related crimes, that they took it out, unfortunately, on these kids. And Jay Embree's connected it, my friends. It goes back. I believe he's correct when he says, though, it's the, the gang member called, the Aryan Knights. The Aryan Knights. This white brotherhood gang, sort of, right? They're very, very dangerous. And one of their MOs, as Jay Embree goes over, literally they tell you, is they'll commit atrocities and do intimidation on the actual parents of the victims at times. They'll take it out on the parents' children, the family members. As part of intimidation and just absolute evil, okay? That's what they do. And I believe it happened in this case. So, those of you that are new to the case, you may be asking, well, why, Jason? Why did they arrest Bryan Kohberger? What's the deal? Well, it all goes back to the university and how things work in Idaho and the absolute corruption and greed, I believe. These are my opinions, my friends, but the facts back it up. The University of Idaho, we know there's a lot of drugs going on. We know the university is heavily relying on all this revenue, right? They want to get as much money as possible, get as many students as they can in this small university. And it's a very old university. We're going to get to the age of the university and the importance of that in a moment. But so they want all this money. Well, do you think for 1 minute, just reason, logic, common sense, everyone, if the students and people that lived in Idaho, if they found out that there was more than one murder, because I'm sure there was more than one murder, I will never, ever believe that only one person was able to pull off these atrocities with a knife, no less, and kill these 4 healthy individuals, even if they were in their beds. I mean, and we know there was a lot of fighting. I don't believe one person did it, and I certainly don't believe Bryan Kohberger did it. He was a patsy. So again, everyone, this is the impetus, I believe, for law enforcement and people like the president of the university and other people at the top. This was the impetus, the reason for them to lie and deceive you, the public. They had to have a patsy and try to nail it on one person doing this crime. And here goes this message, by the way, I want to give to Jay Embree right now, Pavarotti. Pavarotti, I left you a comment. I know you read some of my comments, and thank you for doing so. I wanted Pavarotti to talk about this in one of his videos, maybe bring it up, but I'll bring it up for you guys and gals out there. Did you know, everybody's been asking for the longest time, how did they get to Bryan Kohberger? And Jay Embree, Pavarotti, he's been trying to figure this out as well. He's convinced that they got to Bryan Kohberger in large part because of an informant, right? One of probably Xana's mother or stepmother. She was an informant. And Jay Embree goes through that and goes through the docs and her arrest records and making a deal and all this stuff. I won't get into that in this video. But I want Jay Embree to know and everybody else to know, I'm going to give you my theory on how they got to Bryan Kohberger. Yes, it may have been in part due to an informant, or it may not be an informant at all that really told on Bryan Kohberger. My theory has always been, and you guys and gals can leave me a comment. I'll read them. I appreciate the engagement, okay? And I hope you subscribe to my channel, by the way. If you enjoy my videos and my upcoming IDAHO4, and if you enjoy this video, of course, I hope you'll subscribe. I hope you give me that thumbs up and hit that bell icon to be notified for future videos and leave a comment, okay? Now, as I was saying, I believe they got to Bryan Kohberger as a result of these old universities, remember, the University of Idaho, as I said before, my friends, it's a very old university, kind of like Yale and Harvard, and some of these other older universities in that regard. So Dr. Shiva, who I'm not going to describe to you who he is right now, it'd be a longer video, but he's an amazing leader and educator. You can look him up. He ran for president as an independent there in the United States. Dr. Shiva shows you, everyone, that these older universities, some of them, they have a dossier on all their students. I describe, my friends, it's like a control file. With Congress, the elites often have a control file on basically every person in Congress, meaning they have blackmail. They'll dig up any dirt on any congressperson that they have. So it's kind of similar, I believe, in these older universities at times, like a University of Idaho, for example. They're absolutely going to have a dossier on many of the students, if not every single one of them. So my point is, with Bryan Kohberger, they're going to know that there's this sort of awkward guy. They're going to know that, yes, he did hardcore drugs. We know Bryan Kohberger was a former heroin addict. We know he tried to clean up his act, thankfully, for several times. He may have been doing some hardcore drugs again during the times of and before the murders. But Bryan Kohberger, he's an awkward guy, right? And again, he's doing this PhD in criminology. Do you think for 1 minute that the older University of Idaho, for example, if they have a dossier on their students, obviously, don't you think that they're going to know Bryan Kohberger, what he's doing? They're going to know he's a drug addict. They're going to know he's awkward. They're going to know that we're going to try to set up this guy as the patsy, as the fall guy, especially if they find out, law enforcement, that yes, Bryan happened to be out that night, right? He was probably, just like Ann Taylor is going to suggest again, that Bryan Kohberger was just taking a drive to Huawei Park, right? People will do the pushback and say, oh, Ann Taylor and Bryan Kohberger are trying to claim that he was looking at the stars. How can you see stars? It was a cloudy, cold night. Well, who knows what the real reasons why Bryan Kohberger went to probably the park, but he did. And maybe he was driving around also to do a drug transaction. We don't know, but there's no evidence to suggest that he went to 1122 King Road and committed these atrocities. Except the only evidence, and a lot of you that are Bryan Kohberger, those of us that think Bryan Kohberger is innocent, we all know that, or surmise that the DNA, the touch DNA that law enforcement claimed that they found on a knife sheath, think about this, everybody. Do you think this is just a coincidence that Bryan Kohberger, according to law enforcement, this intelligent killer, happened to leave his knife sheath under the body of Madison Mogen in the bed, and that law enforcement, with their amazing investigation and the science, the FBI investigated, right? They just happened to be able to find, through their amazing investigation, this touch DNA on the button sheath of the knife. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And again, everybody, remember, we have over 99.99% the same DNA. So when you're the FBI, some of these three-letter agencies, and I believe it happened in this investigation, you better believe, if they want to, and I believe it happened in this case, they fudged the data. This was not Bryan Kohberger's touch DNA because he was committing murders. At the very least, you could say that Bryan Kohberger, if it's even Bryan Kohberger's touch DNA, his skin cells on the knife sheath, it was planted. It was most likely planted, unfortunately, by a corrupt cop. And this is why, again, I give credit to Jay Embree with his amazing facts and research that he's found out. He shows you that there was a corrupt police officer, a cop, and he's been exposed as being a corrupt cop. And Jay Embree goes through the whole thing, but I won't get into it. But let me just say, this corrupt cop, Jay Embree, shows you, my friends, he was there. He was the first one at the scene. So he could have easily planted the knife sheath, my friends. And again, the impetus is so strong for some of the elites at the university, the president, etc., potentially also law enforcement. They have a strong, strong desire to have to set up a patsy. They have to set up an innocent person as the this, crazy Ted Bundy because, again, they don't want to lose money. Do you think for a second that parents are going to send their students to the university if they know that there was more than one killer involved, particularly like an area night gang, for example? No, of course not. We know, hardly any students would ever come back to that university. The university's revenue would totally tank. So unfortunately, my friends, this is the greed and the corruption I believe is taking place in small little Idaho, okay, Moscow. It's an absolute travesty on what's going on, just like Jay Embree and many others have said. We got to free Brian KOHBERGER. Now, I want to give you, many of us have probably had some strange, crazy theories as we followed this case. And, many of our theories have changed, right? As we learn more facts of the case, our theories have evolved. One of the things that I was wondering is, could Brian KOHBERGER have sort of been an actor? Because I study the intelligence communities, particularly the CIA, at times the FBI, etc. And I thought that maybe they were using Brian KOHBERGER literally as like an actor. And yet yes, they would go so far as to put him in jail with Brian's sort of permission. They're all working together. And that Brian is just part of the law enforcement's, in the university sort of scapegoat, that it was all agreed upon beforehand, that he'll spend, a year or two in jail. They'll probably feed him good. If he smokes, they'll give him cigarettes, whatever. That was one of my crazy theories. I now do not believe that's the case. I think Brian KOHBERGER, again, he was this awkward, but overall a good person. He had some flaws in his personality, which we all do. But overall, I think he was a well-meaning individual. He went through a lot of hard times emotionally, as he stated on one of his social media posts. He felt like he was lacking empathy, which, sometimes you would think would be a serious concern, because whoever did these atrocities obviously does not have true empathy for other individuals, right? But regardless, I think Brian KOHBERGER, he has some very good traits. He has a good relationship with his father, apparently, right? We kind of saw that. He has a sister, and I think he is a family man. I think Brian KOHBERGER, he wanted to do good in his life, showing you by taking a PhD in criminology, okay? But again, going back to my earlier statement, by the way, everyone, a reminder, as I'm going to repeat, these older universities, they often have a dossier in all their students. So it would be very easy for law enforcement in the university to go into Brian KOHBERGER's background, to find this guy who happens to be taking a PhD in criminology, who happens to be a heroin addict, who's awkward, who happened to be out that night, and they set him up as the patsy, as they're trying to lie to you and say that he committed the atrocities. One individual, Brian KOHBERGER. It's all lies, in my opinion, my friends. It's bullshit. Brian didn't do these crimes. I'm convinced of it now, as Jay Embree, as Pavarotti, as many of you YouTubers are, right? So, thank you so much for listening, everyone. I appreciate it. I could go on and on for hours on this case. I really look forward to hopefully doing future videos here at Jsson True Crime Lover. Thank you for caring, again, about Madison Mogen, who's now passed, unfortunately. Thank you for caring about, of course, Kaylee Gonzalez, who again has passed, and I'm sure they're in heaven. Thank you for caring about Zainer Kernoodle, another beautiful young student and person that has passed and gone to heaven. And thank you for caring, of course, for Ethan Chapman as well, who's passed and gone to heaven. These people, young amazing students, had their whole lives, ahead of them, as we know. They were bright, intelligent students. They had unlimited potential. They had their lives, of course, snuffed out way too early. And we just want to know who the hell did it, right? Was it Brian KOHBERGER? 99.9%, or I'd say 90%, chance that Brian didn't do it. That's how I feel. I'm sure a lot of you as well. And the facts do not support that Brian did this crime. Again, other than a lot of us know or believe that the law enforcement most likely planted that knife sheath. They have their ways of doing that. The FBI, they claim again that Brian had this skin cells, right? Touch DNA on the button snap of a sheath. Come on. What's the likelihood, right? Hardly any chance that happened. Come on. And what's the likelihood, again, of one person being able to stab to death all 4 victims. And what's the likelihood of one person seeing the cars in the parking lot that night? They knew that several people were home. No matter how much you may have planned this crime in your mind or whatever, why would one person go in and do this, even for a thrill kill? The risk is way too much, man. I mean, it's just crazy. So, yeah, I don't believe Brian Kohlberger is somehow this Ted Bundy, as people try to say the guilt or sometimes. Anyway, again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening, everybody. Thank you for caring for these people and the families. You know, the parents are going through, I'm sure, an absolute horrendous time. We can only imagine when you lose a loved one like this and this atrocities. So, you know, and we could talk about some of the parents that, you know, they seem to be very shady, 1 or 2 of these parents, but we're not going to get in that in this video, maybe future videos, but still, you got to feel for each parent that's lost their loved ones, you know, right? So thank you, everyone. Again, I hope you subscribe if you enjoy my videos. I hope you give me the thumbs up if you like my videos, and feel free to leave me a comment. Hit that bell icon to be notified for future videos. My name's Jason. You guys look amazing, by the way. Have an amazing morning, afternoon, and or evening, wherever you are. I gotta go. But more on the IDAHO4, too, in the very near future. More videos. And Jay Embree, hey man, you're a cool dude. One day I want to see you take those glasses off. I want to see your eyes, by the way. Half kidding there. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.